Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Zermatt here from ZimdogTuning, and you join me picking a paint for the number 10 Chevrolet Daytona prototype, which I'm not actually going to be racing in the upcoming Tora Daytona 24 Hours, the Rolex one, but I know a lot of you are, so I thought I'd do a quick video on sort of how to get the best out of this car, how to go about learning the track, some of the things that I do when I first jump in a car for the very first time. So I've just bought this car. I've picked a paint with an appropriate sort of watch on the front to go with the Rolex theme. These are pretty cool actually. I put sort of 600 brake, got a bit fat wing on the back of it, so they've got a whole host of grip, and it, they're actually a real challenge to set up. I'm going to be downloading a tune for this one, but potentially after the race I'll go through and sort of look at the tuning tips for this car. But it's gaining a balance between sort of oversteer and using that rear grip that's available to you. Full aero isn't always the way to go on these, especially on a track like Daytona. So let's jump in. As I said, we're going to be prepping for the Daytona 24 Hours. It's the sort of sports car circuit, I guess, the one with the bus stop chicane, which is so difficult in these cars, and so difficult, but that's part of the reason we do it. For this I'm going to be using sim steering. I think you can get away with just manual in these cars, but I'm not so sure, so I'm going to leave it on sort of manual with clutch. Traction control on. Obviously, if you want to drive with it off, I mean, it's going to be fast, don't get me wrong, but you won't be able to abuse the power and the traction control system in the same way as what we're going to be doing, especially with the tune that we're going to sort of have on the car. So actually, I'm going to take the braking line off as well, because I know a lot of you sort of want to know how I spot braking points for the first time going around the track. So here we are, very first time in this car at all on this game, which I'm sure some of you won't believe, but honestly it is. First thing I do, turn the telemetry on, look at the power band on the left hand side, see where all the power and the torque is, and it looks like this one's pretty high up, so it's going to be a sort of rev the tits off it type car. Don't worry too much about the braking point and that sort of thing, and these first couple of laps, it's all about getting a feel for the car. You see there's quite a lot of torque low down as well, which is going to be useful for a bit of overtaking, come out of slow corners, and also it means you can hold a higher gear through some of these corners that maybe you wouldn't have done before. So we'll experiment with that and see what we discover from that. So obviously that power band though, that's going to inform your tuning. Daytona, like I said, is all about getting the balance right between this straight and the straight after the bus stop chicane. That is a really long straight. We're up at almost 200 in these cars, even with the big rear wing on the end. So it's a serious chunk of time that you're going to be gaining or losing from not having the right aero settings down the straight. But it's also key for this bus stop chicane, because as I go super wide, you don't want to be running so little aero that the car becomes impossible to run through that chicane, and you end up just trying to catch up and gain that time all the way down the straight. But you want to be running enough, so as small aero as you can, that that find that balance between grip through the fast chicane and speed. Because if you're running too much aero, you're just going to be swamped. Let's pause it here, okay? So we're into the first corner for the first time at sort of full speed, and you're looking at this. What do? You look around. You've got the tower on the left. You've got the double yellow line slightly to the left. You've got the white line in front of you. Look on the right hand side. Is there anything that we can note? This is all about picking your braking point, okay? So I think it's going to be somewhere around that sort of dark line. So let's pause it as I hit the brakes. You see, just before we actually run a little bit wide, but what you're doing in that process is trying to find things on the track which are a reliable source of braking. Again, we've got a white line in the middle of the track. That's not going to move, okay? Don't pick clouds or shadows or this sort of Ferris wheel on the left hand side when that goes off the screen, things like that. You need things which are actually going to stay on the track. And again, we're sort of faced with this scenario where we've got cones to pick from, we've got curb on the left, we've got a wall, we've got a bit of tarmacy area, so it's going to be somewhere around the end of the cones, I reckon, or maybe slightly before, as we're doing sort of 170 coming to here. And it's all about picking a point and then fine-tuning it from that point each time you go around, so you're building your sort of schema of the track, if you like. So every corner you go around, or every time you go around that corner, you're trying to push the limit a little bit further, or you're braking a little bit earlier and you're coasting into the corner. You're trying to find that balance between late braking, carrying speed, and getting a good corner exit. And obviously, the more times you go around the corners, the more accurate your schema is going to be. You're going to know where you're going to need to brake for what speed. The dreaded bus stop, absolutely, it's just terrible. But what we actually need to do though is pick a braking point, maybe in the next lap or two. And so I'll just fast forward this a little bit because this is a super long straight. And I think what I'm going to do, actually, I haven't driven this circuit since the track limits have been updated, and that was a long while ago, but just haven't been sort of on Daytona really. So we're going to switch them on. We've got this horrible ribbon. How anyone can drive with this, I've no idea. But again, we're going to sort of try and pick that braking point. I don't think we actually broke too late then. It was just that we were at the slightly wrong angle, and it compromised our sort of entry into that first corner. But having that first corner absolutely nailed is going to be one of the most important things you can do on that track. And like I was saying about building up the schema, you need to know how to enter it from sort of being in the draft, being on the inside, being on the outside, because don't forget you're going to have GT cars on this track as well. So there's a whole host of things that you need to think about when you're preparing for this race. This corner I really like, actually. You've got so many cones on the left to sort of gauge where you brake, and actually, although that line was slightly wider on the entry, you can get away with it because you carry more speed on the exit of the corner, so you can adjust what you're doing to where you are in traffic. So on a pure hot lap, obviously there's going to be a quickest line, or more likely, but in traffic not so much. We'll talk about that a bit later. This one, you've got this big Daytona sign on the right hand side. Okay, you can see it at night, you can see it in the day. It's going to be somewhere in and around this sign, the braking point, so you've got your sort of base one to work for. As I brake a bit early there, take too much grass, and we're just learning at this stage. Okay, we don't have to be perfect. You saw that from the track limits there, though. It is what it sort of looks like. It's the yellow line where you think the track limit should be, if that makes sense. It's a common sense one. So let's take the ribbon off, and let's start another lap. We're faced with this same scenario. Where do we brake? So a little bit earlier this time. Don't run quite as wide. Turn in too early. Okay, and now we know. So we brake roughly the same point. We've not carried as much speed because actually we've been braking in a straighter line than what we were previously. So another thing that you need to account for. So let's have another go. Coming in a little bit wider and braking in the straight line. I think way too early this time. Yeah, okay, we're going to head for that wall. So we need somewhere later than that, but in a straight line, which means we're going to run out wide rather than sort of carrying too little a speed into the apex. So here we go, a little bit too wide really. Actually, we've carried some good speed, a little bit of a wiggle, but that's okay. We get some good traction out there. You can clip over these curbs, not a problem. Now this corner is awkward. At the end of that dotted line is where you brake really in this car, but it's got a funny camber. If you go too wide on the entry, you're going to be out wide forever. It's going to feel like an absolute age before you get back onto the racing line. This one sort of just before the end of the cones. Again, about 3 different lines for this one. You can come in shallow like I did, my Ghost did just then, and get a slower exit because actually this little mini straight isn't that long at all. Or you can, like I just did then, go in wide and cut back in. And it's going to depend where you are in traffic, and especially if you're in a DP car or if you're in a GT car, because I think the two lines are slightly different out there. As with the corner we've just been round, all about getting a good exit onto the straight, but you can play it how you want to in traffic. If you're holding someone up, you can go slower into the corner and then accelerate out, so you compromise their line, especially if they're trying to take that line which carries a bit more speed into the corner, so they're closer to you going down the straight, so they grab the draft. You can compromise that by by braking slightly earlier, maybe coasting a little bit, so it disrupts their way of driving. So onto the straight again. So we've done 4 laps now. I think we're doing okay. You know, it's not amazing, but we're starting to get a feel for the car. We're into the 33s, which I don't think is a terrible lap time at the minute. You see that was much better braking there. I get a little bit of a wiggle again, but again, good traction. I think that's the line now to take for these. And again, try and spot this braking inside that camber this time, and you can see actually we just get we were on course to get such a better exit on that corner until we had a little bit of an oversteer moment. Remember, these cars are set up to oversteer really, even though with that sort of aero on the back. Slightly different line. Let's try a bit of curb. I think that worked pretty well actually. Again, use the Excel diff. It's really high on this car, the settings that you're going to need to go with to drag you round the corner or push you round the corner. That's what I was talking about with those different lines. So we set up completely differently for that corner. I went wider in and tried to get a quicker exit out, and we sort of drive away from our ghost a little bit. Don't go underneath the yellow line like I was almost trying to do then, because you're going to lose time. But again, we're sort of a 1/10.5 up through no real effort really. Try and pick the braking point for this. It's a little bit better on entry. Yeah, much better through here. Just the tiniest bit of penalty on the outside. Need to stay within those white and yellow lines, but that's the line. I think it's vastly different from where it used to be with the previous track limits, where you could just glide across that chicane. You can see we're absolutely miles ahead of our ghost. So reset again, think about what we did last lap for the first corner. Where are we going to brake, how are we going to brake? So we pull out wide, straighter. Actually I brake a little bit less straight this time, but carry some good braking speed. Not as perfect line though as last time. You can see we're sort of half a tenth down or whatever it is. Let's try this outside line. Remember last lap I got an oversteer moment coming out of this corner. There's a bump, an awkward bump on the outside you can see on the ghost there. Actually, I think both of those lines in this car are viable, and it's going to depend if you're trying to go around the outside of a GT car or not. So let's try and coast into this corner a bit more, blip the throttle, don't try and abuse the traction too much. Actually that worked quite well in the end. We sort of got connected. Don't clip the grass like I just did there on the right hand side. You can go on the right hand side on that tarmac, go on the curb, great, but don't go on the grass. Although this is a perfect demonstration of slower in and faster out. So we were well wide on the apex of that corner, and that's a play, that's a move that you can use if you're in traffic, like I said. And look how we've gained back past the ghost, and that's going to be multiplied if you're in draft as well. Too late there. Missed the Daytona sign on the right hand side. You can see I didn't brake until right at the end, which was definitely a mistake, but we know it's somewhere towards the end of this sign. Again, a little bit late. The ghost is much better through there, and it's all about just, for me, rewinding this corner and finding that sort of zone of braking where you know if you brake slightly too early you can coast into this corner, especially with the new track limits. But it's all about having a zone rather than a spot so that you brake, because you're going to be going into that corner at different speeds. We run slightly wide again, but not too bad. You're going to be running, let's have another go. You're going to be running different speeds. You're going to be in the draft. You're going to be trying to overtake GT cars while you're trying to race with the other GP cars. And this is the corner. No matter how hard you try to avoid, connecting with a GT car, it's going to happen. The speed difference is absolutely monumental between these cars coming out of that slow corner, because this has just got so much more torque. And it's so much lighter that it's inevitable that you're gonna come into contact with someone there. So you need to have that zone of excellence, let's call it, where you know that you're going to be able to make the corner, rain come shining. But it's probably not optimal, but it's what you need to happen to make that corner successful. Right, reset, lap 7. We've got the braking line on now, okay? So let's see where our braking compared to when we didn't have the braking line on. I actually think I took a better line in that corner then. We just clipped the grass slightly on the inside. So let's just pause it here. Now I was braking, you can see I brake a little bit later there, and it seems that we carried more speed into the braking zone even though we were braking earlier. Remember, I've got a bit of a wiggle on there, and we were sort of equal with the ghost, which had a wiggle, so I don't think that's the optimal line really. I think we can brake later. Again with this one, we were braking sort of the second cone at the end before, and even even still, we sort of carry more speed through the braking zone. So it's interesting to see how the car reacts on braking a little bit less, but a little bit earlier. Second cone on the right here on here, but again, you can see my Ghost, which we ran a little bit wide, fly through us in the braking zone. But then, I think we get a pretty good exit here, and let's see if the Ghost comes back at us down this straight, because if it does, then that's a real play in the race to, and yeah, here we go, look, it's just starting to creep up behind us, and if you can time that right in the draft going into this chicane, it's an opportunity. It's not a massive opportunity, but it's certainly an opportunity as we cut the chicane a little bit again, and then let's play the rewind game. I'm really trying to work on this zone of excellence I was talking about. It's definitely in this Daytona sign, and I think it's somewhere around the T, but I don't want to sort of aim for the T specifically, because my brain just doesn't work that quickly to be able to sort of guarantee that I'm going to break in on that particular point each time. So time to compose yourself, keep as low to the yellow line as possible without going over it really, as it will unsettle the car. Think about how we're going to set up for the next corner when we cross onto another lap. Remember, this is the first time we've driven this car. We're 7 laps in, and I think we've got a pretty good sort of gauge on where we are, sort of 33.4, which was 3 or 4 tenths quicker than what we were doing before. Again, same line, but I didn't clip the grass that time. Way faster coming out of the first corner with, what, a tenth and a half up. Let's try this wide line again. See, there's that awkward bump in the middle which just upsets the car. It didn't actually affect us too badly there, and I get a very straight exit. And when I talk about a straight exit, as we get 2.5 tenths up, it's important in these cars to abuse the traction control. And what I mean by that is, there's 2 ways to play it. You can either be very smooth as if you're driving without traction control, and the good thing about that is that it's consistent. But the bad thing about that is it's not optimal. You won't necessarily be getting the most out of the differential on the car. You'll be safe, and you'll be half a tenth slower every lap, every corner, which is fine. But when you're getting up into the real top level, you need to be trying that optimal sort of abusing the traction technique, if you like, because I'm really struggling with this chicane more and more. So what I mean by abusing the traction is stamp on the throttle, maybe not stamp on it, but really full throttle early as you can, and then you adjust through the steering rather than the power. So if you get on the power too early and you're still on full lock, it's just going to bog down. So you need to find that balance between getting on the power and straightening out your car straight away. So now we've done our braking line lap, we've got a 0.3, which I think is pretty good, 387. We're going to try and match that without the braking line, as I absolutely just fly past the Ghost on the first corner straight off the track. And I really need to work on sort of where I'm gauging it, which is more difficult because you don't have the braking line as a reference. Even though you're not braking, even though you're not braking where it says brake, it's always an evolving reference for you on the track. This is a good opportunity actually to follow our Ghost that we did with the braking line to see where we can gain. And you can see actually, being on the inside of the track there, we gain time round the corner because of that silly camber. There's a slightly off camber bump, which is frustrating. We brake later into here, which again, I think we do gain time there on the curb, and I think it is fine to go on the curb on the inside there. Actually, these cars are set up so they can turn on the power, that high XL diff, so you can get away with it. Carry a bit more speed through here, which it isn't too bad. It worked out quite nicely in the end. Keep as low as possible. You're going to have GT cars in the way here though, so practice going out wide. But actually, I think that wide line or carrying a bit more speed through that corner, just fully off throttle works quite nicely. There's always clip the wall somewhere around the T. No, again, something to really practice, and this is going to be the make or break on this car around this track, is how consistently you can go around that chicane, because there's a real opportunity to gain positions, not just a position. If the 2 cars are battling in front of you and you are fluent through that chicane and clean, and you pick up the draft and you've got enough in your gear like we do to really excel, then it's going to be a real opportunity. So final thing to sort of practice when you're preparing for this race: silly lines. Not really silly lines, overtaking lines, let's call them. you're going to have GT cars all over the track, and it's going to be frustrating, and you're going to catch 2 or 3 fighting at once, and it's going to be a nightmare. So you need to practice braking and on throttle offline. Okay, so can you go around this left-hander flat from being in the inside? Yes, you can. Where do we brake? If we brake on the inside, would we have hit a car there? Probably. So probably need to brake a little bit early there. What happens if we're drafting a car through here, pull out and then dive down the inside? Not too bad there. Could we have ramped up on the curb? Possibly. Would have unsettled the car? Probably. You know, even things like practicing going a little bit higher on this sort of banking or around the banking at the other end of the track, because it's a skill going around the banking when you're not sort of got that line to as a reference, and again going into this chicane sort of with a shallower line, I think actually probably take it better, even though we're coming in at a different angle. Again, really difficult actually to stay clean there. Sort of big note to people who are racing the prototypes to sort of make sure you sort of stay clean there. Don't go down on the circuit like I did there unless you really have to. And it does seem silly, but coming into the pit entry, kind of rewarding on this car. Anyway, what do we get? We ended up setting a 133.387. As you can see, you know, it wasn't clean. We're down in 976th, but that's fine. It would have put us what, 8th, 7th or 8th there. It's 8th place, which I don't think is bad for a 10-lap sort of experimentation video, but you know, there's definitely time to be improved there, but confident I could probably get in the 32s, which I think is top of the leaderboards, with a little more time. Guys, bit of a different video, much longer, much more in depth. Let me know in the comments if you think you know, this is more the sort of content that you're going to be wanting. I know this was definitely requested by one of the viewers, so thanks very much for the ideas. But do consider subscribing if you've made it this far in the video. Thanks very much, and give it a bit of a like as well. Hit that bell icon if you want more of these, because I really like going into more detail on these tracks and how to drive the cars. So not a problem for me to do these videos. If you want them, let me know in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.